So we are live and recording. Hello and welcome to another episode, number 14. This episode is a special one because we are talking about a new topic, fraud in our current climate, how to grow safely with Denise Purtzer. Denise, thanks a lot for joining us today.
Thanks, Valentine. I'm very excited to be here today.
Perfect. So let me tell a bit about yourself to our audience. Denise, she is the VP of Partnerships and Alliances at ClearSale, a global fraud prevention system. And Denise has 20 years of experience in e-commerce. So today we're gonna touch these three topics: how the sudden shift in buyer profiles is affecting fraud algorithms everywhere, the importance of bolstering your e-commerce strategy, and how to get your brick and mortar store online during this time. So, Denise, thanks a lot for joining us again.
Thank you.
So, let me ask you the same question that I'm asking everyone which is here with us. The first question is how you first got into this e-commerce landscape at the very beginning.
Oh, that's a good question. It was really by chance. I was doing something completely different. I'd been in sales for quite some time, and my husband actually was working as a database administrator for a startup company in e-commerce called eCellerate. And eCellerate was allowing transactions to happen with digital goods online. And because of that, he said, hey, there's a sales position available. It seemed to be a better fit for our family, for me to be traveling less and things like that. So from there, I was able to come on and start my time in e-commerce.
Excellent. So, in after all these years, is there something, let's say, that you think, looking back after all these 20 years, what is the most, let's say, outstanding things? What is the most outstanding experience that you have ever encountered in this landscape?
It's hard to pin it down to just one thing. I think one of the things that I could wrap up into one comment would be around the ability to travel globally and understand how to do business in China or in Russia or anywhere else in the world. It's just so different. And having that opportunity to work in other communities and meet people globally was probably the most outstanding thing. And many of the people I still keep in touch with, even though I'm not doing business with on a day-to-day basis. So that's something that is personally very fulfilling for me. But
Yeah.
also just being part of different chapters, so to speak, where things were emerging. For instance, affiliate marketing way back when, that was something that it wasn't even barely termed when I started jumping into it. And I didn't even know exactly what I was getting into, but people selling other people's products is a very interesting space to be in. And being part of affiliate summits and some of these different conferences over the years and seeing them evolve and change as the times changed and as Google changed and make things change as far as marketing, that was really interesting as well.
Yeah. So, Denise, regarding the travel nowadays, you're not traveling anymore. How that how the pandemic do you think has affected this kind of relationships? Because most of the relationships don't have this social and emotional component anymore, and it's all about Zoom, Skype, Teams, and Hangouts.
It's so true, but here we are today, halfway across the world, and we're able to communicate. So that's a beautiful
Yeah.
thing. I was really worried about it at first because my life, especially during the summer, is filled with conferences. I was supposed to be traveling to many different places that I haven't even been yet before, like Australia. So I was very excited about that. But what I found with the partnerships thing is it's taken off even more quickly because that barrier isn't there where we can say, oh, we'll just meet at the next show and we'll talk about it. All of
Yeah.
a sudden, everything became more urgent, and
Hmm.
we've never been busier. So, while I was worried about it, and while I'm not fulfilled personally in getting out and seeing people and being able to shake hands and hug and do all those sorts of things, that part is hard. But I think that, business wise, it hasn't been as big of a barrier as I thought.
Yeah. So, can you tell us regarding the current environment where the e-commerce leaders are now, let's say, in the trenches of they had this spike of demand, and then it all got to, let's say, a normal, while the overall consumption is not that high. How important is fraud during this current environment?
That's a good question, because we've had a lot of merchant discussions lately that have said, well, we haven't had fraud before. And I think that, and now we do, and why is that happening? And I think it breaks down to a couple of different things. First of all, on the fraudster side, it's really the perfect storm for fraudsters when you think about it, because there are a lot of people that are out of work, people that might be desperate for money. So those sorts of things drive people to do things that maybe they weren't doing or dabbling in. They might go full in. So fraudsters, there are more of them than there have been before. You couple that with the fact that, it's a time of emotions. So phishing sites to gather that credit card information from you, not legitimately gather, is up about 65% during this time frame. So you've got more stolen credit cards and you've got more fraudsters. So that creates the perfect storm. But then on the merchant side, it becomes very different, because everything is shifted, right? You've got a shift in volumes. You've got more sales coming in for certain merchants. Things you wouldn't think about, like bidet seat covers are selling like hotcakes during the COVID time, because toilet paper was not available. Things that are bringing families together outdoors, like play type things or puzzles, all these sorts of things. All of a sudden, the volumes just increased majorly. We had outdoor griddle company that increased 900% month over month during this time, which, when you think about that scale of volume, all of a sudden it's a whole different ball game, and merchants aren't understanding if these volumes are coming in legitimately or not. So that's one piece, is the variation in volumes. The other thing is that we've got buyers that have never bought before coming online, because they really have no choice, whether it be for groceries or for any, health goods, all these sorts of things, because they're worried about going to the stores if the stores are closed. So you've got first-time buyers, which could be a big, strong signal for a fraud or a flag for fraud, because there is no history.
Track record. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And then you've got an opportunity where people might be living elsewhere. It might be a second home. Or I talked to a guy one day that was originally from Europe. He lived two different places in Europe. So his Amazon account was in Germany. Then he lived in England. And now currently he's stuck in Brazil at his brother's house. So that can be a crazy thing to try to figure out on the back end from a fraud perspective for that customer, who seems to be skipping all over the place. Are they legitimate or not? And then you've got recurrency and velocity rates. So people are buying more often. People that might have bought once a year or 3 times a year might be buying that many times per month or even week. So all of those things combined make it just a crazy time to try to figure out fraud, if that's not what you do every day.
Yeah. So regarding the, let's say, ways that you can prevent fraud, tell us how you've seen this happening, and what the sellers and the merchants must do in order to prevent that.
Yeah, there are a lot of different things that can be done. I think we need to back up a little bit and talk about the different outcomes, because a lot of people, even if you're a merchant that's selling point of sale and going online right now, that's an uneasy time in some ways, because you have to consider that fraud piece, but there's another piece you have to consider too. So point of sale, card that's dipped, and the card is approved, and there's generally not an issue. That's really how the point of sale transaction process goes. But there could be like 4 different outcomes when it comes to online or card not present. The card can be swiped or entered into the site, and the outcome is such that it's approved and it doesn't seem like there's fraud, and no fraud ever occurs. But conversely, if you've got a card that's entered and it gets approved, and then down the road, it could even be several days, weeks, or even months, a chargeback could occur for different reasons. So then that merchant is on the hook for that, right? So that's a bad thing, and that's an opportunity that wasn't blocked. There's also the situation where a card goes through and it's a fraudulent transaction, and so it gets blocked. So that transaction never occurs. There's no pain, no problem. But then there's that fourth scenario that I think a lot of merchants don't think about, especially online, where a good order comes through, but for whatever reason, it could be many reasons that we talked about, like, okay, an address mismatch or a CVV mismatch or all these sorts of things. If you've got simple rules in place, that order could be blocked, and it's really a good order at the end of the day. So that's what we consider a false decline. And in the studies we've done across our millions and millions of transactions that we do in a year, about 65% of those are actually good sales, and they should be going through. That's more damaging financially. So if you look at LexisNexis did a study at the end of last year that showed that the financial impact is actually over 3 times the amount when it's a false decline versus just a chargeback. So people think about that chargeback, and merchants think about that, and it's very top of mind because it's on their statement at the end of the month, and they're seeing that pain because it's a minus on their statement, but they're not thinking about the false declines and all the impact. And that's 3 times the amount because they've taken that marketing dollar, and I know you talk about marketing a lot on this podcast. They've taken those marketing dollars, they've spent those to try to get that legitimate customer to the table. They're also damaging their brand and their reputation because most of the time those customers are going to go away. They're going to go to a competitor and they're never going to come back. So you don't have that ongoing revenue coming from them potentially moving forward because you gave them that bad experience up front. So that's something that merchants have to consider as well.
Yeah. So basically, what you're saying is that the customer lifetime value is zero because it's not only that transaction, but also the transactions going forward and let's say network effect, which is not happening as these customers will not promote the brand, but on the contrary, they will be pissed off and they will not promote the brand to their friends or relatives, or on the contrary, they will do a negative advertising for them.
Absolutely.
And in terms of preventing this from happening, let's say many merchants think that this is not their job. So that's the job of the payment gateway to do all these arrangements. I mean, it's like from a far perspective, this looks like it's not my job. My job is to pay the 1.5% commission to the payment processor, and that's it. How do you let's say change their minds, and what kind of arguments do you give them so that they can be aware of that?
That's a great point, Valentin, because I've worked on the payment side for most of my 20 years in this career. And on the payment side, obviously getting that sale through is very important. But when we talk about the false declines and we're relying on the payments company to screen that, it would be in the payments company's best interest to just go ahead and get rid of anything that looks slightly suspicious, because at the end of the day, they don't want those chargebacks to occur either, right? Everybody's being held to that standard of trying to keep chargebacks below that 1% or 0.9%. And if not, there are obviously implications to that merchant, like additional fees and such. So given that, it's important to have somebody on your side that's looking out for those false declines and taking that into effect, as well as the keeping out the chargebacks. So what we do essentially is we have our algorithm and we have our machine learning, and everything goes through that. And this is something that's a very different approach than anybody else out there. We have everything go through the algorithm and the machine learning, and about, a vast majority of those sales will be approved based on that alone. But if something is suspect, this is where we differ. We actually go ahead and pass it on to a team of, we have over 1,000 reviewers that actually put human intervention into play and take a look at things from the human point of view. Because take, for instance, Chanel is one of our clients, and you go online to buy a $5,000 Chanel handbag. And then 15 minutes later, you decide, I've got buyer's remorse because I really needed that wallet to match. That's a $3,000 purchase after a $5,000 purchase within a few minutes with the same buyer and the same credit card. If you've got a rules-based system set up, that would throw red flags all over the place, and in which case both of those might be clawed back and declined, in which case that gives your VIP clients a very bad taste in their mouth, right? So if you've got human intervention into play and the human looks at it and says, okay, that second purchase looks very legitimate, as does the first. We're going to go ahead and let that go through. This is all but unbeknownst to the consumer. On the other side, everything just looks like it goes through just fine, and then it gets approved. And then you're not training that machine learning to decline such instances and have additional false claims moving forward. So that's the sort of thing that a merchant needs to take into consideration when they're trying to make sure that they're stopping that fraud.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And in terms of let's say the uh, impact, you've said that 65% of the chargebacks are illegitimate, right?
Mm-hmm.
So are false declines or vice versa?
Well, 65% of false declines are generally orders that can be approved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So mainly that's really impactful for them. Have you? Is there any way to let's say use this to your advantage, or have you seen merchants that on the contrary they are let's say if they are mistaking they prefer to mistake in the favor of the customers?
Yeah, well, that's when your chargebacks get out of balance, right? And so that's one thing too, where if we've approved something that is results in a chargeback, we will actually compensate that merchant back in full, so they're not out of that money. And that's an important piece of that too, with that chargeback guarantee, because at the end of the day, it's all about balance, and at the end of the day, it's all about net profitability for the merchants. You work hard to get those sales in, to gain those customers. You've got to take some risk to make sure that you're letting those legitimate customers in, but that risk shouldn't financially be on your shoulders. That's something that we as experts can handle for you. So given that, at the end of the day, you want to consider that those three pillars essentially, where you're having that customer experience, you're having that ability to stop the bad stuff, and at the end, it's the net profitability.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. So, Denise, you have let's say this access as we do as well to a lot of data around what's going on in the e-commerce space. What do you think are some let's say valuable shifts that the e-commerce leaders must do at their mentalities first, because it's everything starts from here, right? In order to improve their e-commerce strategy.
Yeah, when we look at merchants, a lot of times when they're first starting out, they don't understand the scalability factor and the ability to make a lot of money. So if you're on a platform that doesn't allow you to grow or go into maybe an enterprise level at some point, you're going to have to invest in re-platform in the future. So I think that's the first thing you have to consider, is starting out your foundation with a platform that can support you long term, whether it's within the level you're at or jumping up levels and investing into additional levels. And there are lots of different platforms out there. I think there was like over 400 different e-commerce platforms that are noted with some of the different companies that track that sort of stuff. So that's a tough decision. That's a very personal decision. So when merchants ask us, what e-commerce platform should I go on? It's easy just to try to answer, but it's like it's almost like you're trying to set somebody up on a date. You have to know a little bit more about them and pair them accordingly. And so I think that that's something that they should consider. But also making sure that, you know, their site is built for success, being mobile friendly and allowing for those mobile sales to come along. And then you touched on the payment processor, making sure that you've got a payment processor that will grow with you. Ask them the questions, ask them about interchange rates, ask them about all the additional fees, because that's in the very fine print generally. And most merchants don't pay attention to that until it's too late and they've got all these exorbitant fees. But also have a payment processor that you can reach out to. It's not just about getting the best rate, it's about getting that service behind. So if you've got questions, you've got somebody you can actually reach out to and work with. And then make sure you're protected on the fraud side, because people think about getting all those sales through, but they don't think about the what ifs until they've had an issue. We talked to a merchant last year at Magento Imagine conference, and they sell baby furniture. So they thought that, they're not going to be targeted for fraud. They only had sales that were coming in that were like $25 and $50 chargebacks, and their AOV was much greater than that. And it's a story I like to tell because I hear this constantly. That's how fraudsters dabble. They check the credit cards with lower amounts, they see what they can get through, they check the vulnerabilities on the site, and then boom, they hit this particular merchant with $15,000 in fraud. Within days, they had that much coming through, and they didn't know when it was going to stop. So then it was like, hey, how quickly can you get us up and running with fraud prevention so that we can stop this bleeding? And I think the other thing is that merchants don't think about the fraud piece as far as being vulnerable. If they're a small merchant, they think if I don't have a brand name, I'm not going to be a target. But if you think back to what we were talking about prior with that perfect storm and the fact that there are more fraudsters out there, they're digging deeper and they're hitting more sites. And they know that some of these sites, such as jewelers that are coming online, might not be thinking about the fraud piece because they're new to the e-commerce circuit and their high average order value, and it's products that they can resell very easily. All of these things are perfect targets for fraudsters.
Yeah, that's uh, that's great. And in terms of the, let's say, strategy itself for e-commerce merchants right now, we actually have a question from Rashad. So, as a merchant, what would you recommend to be the best way to build better trust with new customers?
That is a good question. So, if you want to build trust with customers, you've got to give them a good experience. And I think that something to consider right now is on the payment space. I know here in the US, alternative payments with buy now, pay later is very huge. I know it's taking off in Australia, UK, but not all the countries so far. So, that's something you can consider. Be empathetic in the fact that people might need to buy something right now, but they might not have all the money for it. They might be on a limited income if they're not working, as many people are around the globe right now. So offering them payments that are friendly to them, like a buy
Yeah,
now, pay later would be one thing. Giving them a good experience. So giving them the experience that is needed to check out, whether they're on mobile device or whatever the case might be, that makes them feel comfortable as well. And don't make them work to check out. I mean, get them if they're ready to check out, get them to the cart and get them, checked out in a manner that's quick, but also be available for them if they have questions. Give a little bit of personalization on the site and let them know who you are and where you come from, because in certain scenarios, certain products, there is a lot of fraud right now. These sites are jumping up and selling, healthcare remedies or chemicals or masks or all these things that are never intended to be shipped. They're just taking money. So if
hmm,
you're selling these types of products, make sure you're giving people that assurance that you're real, that you've been around. Give them physical information about where you are and all these sorts of things. And then on the shipping portion of it, make sure you're letting them know along the way when their product is going to arrive, whether it's via emails or texts or whatever the case might be.
yeah. I can add something here, Denise, regarding the onboarding of the new customers. I think it's really underrated the fact that the emotion that the customer has when he's buying online for the first time, because we have a new wave of customers placing their first orders online because they've been actually forced to do so. It wasn't maybe from their own decision, but they couldn't place they couldn't buy these things like they used to do. The idea that I have for onboarding these new customers is to assist them more than you used to do, because giving them the clarity and making sure that they are they are not expecting the order without knowing when it's going to show up at their door, or making sure that they are aware about the hidden costs if there are any, and making this first experience as pleasant as possible will allow them to appreciate this experience and come back. And I think it's undervalued the let's say the post purchase experience before they get the order. And another important thing is the unboxing itself, so you can come up with let's say some pleasant surprises, because that's a moment when, okay, you've paid $200, $60, whatever you've paid for that product. But if you over deliver at that moment when there is an emotional load over there, you might have a good surprise for those customers to become promoters of your brand.
Absolutely. I love that idea. Another thing is make the e-commerce experience more brick and mortar like. We've got a partner named Immerse. It's IMMERSS.live. What they do is they provide the opportunity to do online shopping one-to-one with a sales associate so they can connect via video and make a purchase that way. So it's great for products that have a lot of detail, a lot of information to share about, or they need to talk through and have that assurance. You can also do trunk shows with that type of application. And I think it's brilliant for this time, especially when we go back to those jewelers, where here in America, I was talking to one of the associations, and about 50% of all of the mid-tier independent jewelers are not online. So they're scrambling to get online right now. And they're finding issues with doing that. Obviously, if you have $1,500 AOV or higher for that purchase price, that's something that is very risky for not only the buyer, like you say, in that buyer experience, but
Yeah.
people are still going on with life. There are still anniversaries, there are still birthdays, there are still engagements going on, and people still want to make those purchases. So if you've got that more personalized experience with video where they can come in and chat one-on-one as an example, that's another thing that people can do to help ease that anxiety of making a purchase.
Yeah, we have one more question, Denise, from via LinkedIn from Guido Jansen. So he says that detecting fraud seems a bit like it's a technical arms race between fraudsters and the companies trying to detect them, where one is continuously overtaking the other. And correct him if he's already having a wrong assumption. And he's actually asking that would you say machine learning or AI is a big threat that might be much more beneficial for fraudster than for the companies fighting them, or do both sides equally benefit of this?
Guido, you're absolutely right in your assumption. It is a race. And so our company started out in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Brazil is one of the most difficult places to fight fraud. So we kind of did it backwards compared to a lot of companies out there, in the fact that we worked with one of the toughest markets and really learned how to do business in Latin America. And in Latin America, fraudsters can be even more complicated and I would say intelligent in what they do. They're very good at what they do. We learned a lot from that. If you are relying only on machine learning, it can become something that fraudsters can turn against you, because we talked about that false decline piece and how the machine can learn the wrong things. You're absolutely right. Fraudsters can beat the system just like that if it's machine alone. And that's why we take a multi-tiered approach and put human intervention into play, not only with the analyzation, but we also take a look. We have 100 data scientists that look at cross sections within a vertical, within a country, within a merchant, within all sorts of things, and are constantly looking at the numbers and looking for patterns and things like that. And that's how we come across a lot of the fraud too. So it is, if it's just machine learning versus humans being the fraudsters, I would say the fraudsters are going to win ultimately. But if it's machine learning with humans versus fraudsters, I would say that fraud prevention has the leg up.
Perfect. So the next question that I have for you, Denise, is regarding this transition. We've seen large companies that are turning to the digital online channels to sell. It was that funny thing on LinkedIn that the best driver in for digital transformation wasn't the CTO but was COVID-19. So what can you say about this topic? How to get the brick and mortar stores online during this time? Of course, some of them are already transitioning, but more of them are actually trying to make it online.
Yeah, it's been interesting. So one of the examples I'll use is grocery stores. We were working with a really large grocery store chain in Latin America who had been 100% brick and mortar pre-COVID. and then went 100% online within a matter of weeks. And I saw a stat the other day that really caught my attention because it put it into perspective. There are companies that are doing things in 2 to 3 months that it would generally take them 2 to 3 years to do. So because of that, I think that if you're rushing through, there tends to be mistakes and there tends to be issues. Obviously, nothing that you do in that short a period of time is going to be perfect. But out of desperation, I think that companies have been forced to do things that maybe they've been thinking about or dabbling in, and they're going all in on. So I think given that, we've worked with really large companies that have gone that direction, such as the vertical I mentioned, but we also work with a lot of opportunities with small businesses that say, okay, I'm sitting at home and I'm out of a job. I'm going to go ahead and start an online business. And it's a great opportunity for them to do so. And it's been really fulfilling to work with some of these companies and get to know the merchants behind it and understand what's driving them and help them out. We have two lines of business, essentially. We work on the enterprise side and we work with really, really large brands globally. But my heart really is in with the SMB merchants that are getting going, whether it's, a quick plug and play on a Shopify or a BigCommerce platform where they can get started with not a lot of money and really get up and running. So I think that's interesting to think about the aspect as well as, it's given people opportunities that haven't seen before, besides just forcing companies into doing things.
Yeah. In terms of the, let's say, biggest not challenges but self-made errors or mistakes for e-commerce companies transitioning to the online, what can you say about this topic, Denise?
I think the supply chain piece has been a big problem for people. So they have product and they don't think about the fact that they may sell out in a matter of days. And then fulfillment might become an issue. That's a very apparent thing with like face masks. We had a company that was selling Hawaiian shirts that we talked to, and just kind of trendy, fun, quirky, different fabrics that they had. They weren't able to keep their factory going and their workers working because in the first, I would say 8 to 10 weeks of COVID, certain things were not selling as well as others. Clothing and apparel was one of them, unless it was leisure, athletic wear. That was selling like hotcakes because everybody was getting into comfort mode in their home computers and sitting in their home offices. But other things were not selling as quickly. So what they did was they pivoted and started selling face masks, but they didn't know that they were going to get orders for like 10,000 at a time. And they were wondering, is this legitimate? Do I fulfill? So they were actually declining the orders because A, they weren't able to fulfill them. And B, they didn't know if it was a legitimate order. But that could have been a lot of money and work for their workers if they would have planned accordingly and thought it through. So I think the biggest thing is thinking big scale, because you've got a much greater audience that's online and purchasing right now.
Excellent. So, Denise, the current environment is, let's say, unpredictable. There are a lot of bad news coming, and more bad than they used to be. Actually, it was an upward trend in June, but now the current environment is not looking that bright. So when you look at the future and when you look at these trends, what can you say about the agility for transitioning online for the bricks and mortar stores? Do you think this is a good idea? If they haven't started, do you think this is gonna be like the normal thing? I mean, we've seen these statistics that we are already in the 2025 according to the current numbers of the online retail. But do you think this is gonna keep going like this or not?
I wish I had a crystal ball, and I wish right now that everybody here could tell what was going on even next week, let alone 2025, right? It's a really difficult time. And Valentine, I don't know about you, but I'm tired of the negativity and the sadness. It's nice to have some bright spots in there for sure. I would say e-commerce is definitely one of those bright spots. I feel very fortunate to be in e-commerce and to have a job where I've never been busier in all my life. And I feel like anybody we touch is in the same boat. I
Yeah.
don't think that's going to go away because I think that these first time buyers that have come in that see, and I'll use my parents as an example, they're scared to buy things online, but they have been forced to because they're more scared to go to a store right now. But
Yeah.
then they're finding that it's really nice just to show up on have stuff show up on your doorstep
Doorstep. Hmm.
and be able to bring it in and not have to deal with getting in the car and going somewhere and loading it up and all of these sorts of things. So they're starting to buy more and more. And I don't think that's going to go away. I think e-commerce is going to benefit from this for a long time. I worry more about the brick and mortars, and I worry about those businesses that aren't thinking about moving online and doing something to have a presence there because they're really going to miss out.
Yeah, got it. So, Denise, as we approach the end of our conversation, I would love to get your opinion and to share with our audience what do you do to grow internally as an individual. As it's about the growth show on e-commerce, but the people are making the whole environment, right? So we must look within ourselves as well. So tell us your growth hack if you have something like that around.
Oh, growth hack. I think podcasts are definitely part of it. It's wonderful. One of the things that I try to do right now and is find that balance between finding something that makes me happy and getting away from the office, and that's really hard when you're in a home office. One of my happy places is the garden, but I can continue to grow in a business sense and grow as a person by listening to different podcasts while I garden. And that's one thing that I found to be a way to kind of balance things and learn. But I think right now it's important to grow with each other and to uphold each other and to pull each other up. And we can't hug each other right now. But I suggest to everybody that you go out and let them know that you're thinking about hugging them because it still feels good.
Yeah.
But and I think that's what's going to get us all through this is helping each other out and being more open minded. And I think you can do that when you learn about things and learn about people on a global level. So that's what I always try to do too, is get out of my bubble here in the US and see what's going on elsewhere and
Yeah.
figure out how things are working for people around the world. And I'm fortunate enough to be able to talk to people globally every single day. And that's something that helps me grow as a person every day. And so I challenge everybody to do that.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. So, Denise, any question that I haven't been so inspired to ask you within this podcast?
Um, I know this group hasn't really heard much about fraud in the past.
Yeah.
Wondering, what do you hear with when you're talking to people? It's a lot about marketing when it comes to e-commerce and things like that. Do people talk about fraud very often?
It's a topic which is kind of neglected, to be honest. I mean, most of our audience are e-commerce owners or e-com leaders, which are in the, let's say, mid-size level. So they don't have in the whole economy of their business. They are struggling to actually have a repeatable business cycle, so that they can actually get to the point where this is an important problem. And I do think it's about the scale of these companies, as at the beginning the generating the first orders, and then let's say nailing down the business processes so that you can deliver a great customer experience, and then identifying the product assortment are more important, and these are kind of let down. And but as the business is growing, I've actually had this problem because I've been an e-commerce entrepreneur myself, and when we reached a certain level of orders, something like 15,000 orders per month, that was becoming an issue because we were losing. We were letting money on the table without actually realizing it. So once you
Mm-hmm.
zoom in on this, you actually realize the importance of it, and the beauty of let's say handling this problem is that this can be outsourced. So this is not taking the bandwidth of your team. But I think it's a matter
Absolutely.
of focus and prioritization.
I would agree. I would agree. And I think that it's important for merchants that are out there that have questions to know that we, as a company, look to solve all kinds of problems. I head up the partnerships for the company, and our sales team knows that if there are problems with payments or if there are problems with, trying to find somebody to do AdWords campaigns for you or any of these sorts of things that you're looking to solve within that e-commerce space, we don't just solve the fraud problem. We have partners that help do all these sorts of things, and we are thrilled to have these discussions and help solve these problems and connect you with the right people to solve those. So I just wanted to make that point as well.
Perfect. So, Denise, where can people reach out to find you?
I can be found on LinkedIn. My name is Denise Purtzer. The last name is P as in Paul, Urtzer. Or you can reach me direct at denise.purtzer@clear.sale. Or you can reach us at partners@clear.sale if that's easier than my
Yeah.
name.
Anyways, I've added for those of you which are watching this on Crowdcast, you have this green button over here so that you can visit Denise's website. So Denise, thanks a lot for being with us today, and may you be safe, and may we hear each other on under better circumstances. And for you which are out there, we'll see each other next week with Jeffrey McIntyre. We will speak about customer value optimization. So, Denise, thanks again, and all the best from Bucharest, everyone.
Thank you, Valentine. Goodbye.